Well, now that we've set up your camera to the recommended settings, we've attached the lens, and we've installed the software, it's time to go take some pictures. One last thing, for those of you who own a laptop computer, you may want to take that along with you because we can actually download these images on site and check the quality of them before we leave the property. Let's go look at a house. So here we are outside. Now before we take a 360 picture, we need to talk a little bit about the neighborhood. In a perfect scenario, if we had a neighborhood of equally priced homes and very consistent landscaping, the ideal photo might be actually taken from the center of the street and grabbing the entire neighborhood in 360 degrees. But here's the classic California scenario. We've got a subject property here that's going to be in more upper bracket price property. But right next door, we've got more of a mixed neighborhood. And down the street, we've got a rental property, apartment building, and the classic scenario, we've got a car line or a street lined with automobiles. Well, obviously we can't get everybody in the neighborhood to move their cars. So what we're going to try to do is be more strategic about where we place the camera to capture this 360-degree image. Now, looking at the subject property, you're going to notice that straight on we've got a tree that masks most of the house. And what we want to do is try to capture the house over to the side. The second thing we want to do is de-emphasize the neighbor's property. And to do that, we're going to take advantage of this barrier or this fence in between the two properties. So instead of taking the picture out here in the street, we're going to actually move the tripod closer to the property. So let's go take a look at that. Now what we've done is we've moved the camera and tripod closer to the property. And what we're going to be able to do is take advantage of this visual buffer between the subject property and the neighbor's property. The key is we want to get this lens as high as possible so that we can capture the entire property in the image. What we're going to do after we take this photo is actually invert the lens and show you an alternate way to get a photograph when you've got to get closer to the property. So the first thing to make sure you have done is make sure that the camera and the lens is level. And I do most of this by eye. The tripod is going to, in most cases, be on an irregular landscaping, and so don't worry so much about leveling the tripod. You want to make sure that the camera is level to the eye. So what we've done is we've set up the camera now, we've got everything leveled, we've taken advantage of the spot that we want to capture the property from, and now it's time to take the picture. Now before we take this photograph, we've talked about setting up the camera when we were back earlier in the videos. We talked about setting the self timer. But the second dilemma we've got to deal with here is, how do I get myself out of this picture? Well, that's where we're going to take advantage of this wall. Not only are we going to use it to mask the neighbor's property, but it's also going to hide me when I take the picture. So now that I've got the timer set, I'm going to actually start the timer and very carefully step over the wall, step over to the side, and I'm just going to count down approximately 10 seconds. So we'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So now we can assume our image has been taken, and we'll pop back over the wall and take a look at what we got. Now, before we move to the next location, I want to show you two additional ways to take exterior photographs. The classic scenario is where I'm going to take a picture and there is no buffer. There's no place for me to hide and get out of the picture. Now, a lot of agents look for small fences, they look for a large tree. The key is when you set this timer, you've got to figure out how far you can get. In some cases, if you've got parked cars in the street, you might step behind a parked car. But what I want to do is show you a perfect scenario that you can take a 360 and not have to run anywhere. To do that, we're going to actually disconnect the camera from the tripod. We're going to place the tripod out of the picture. And what I'm going to actually do is move out to the same spot where I took the last picture. And what I'm going to do is turn the timer off. What I'm going to do is actually take a still photo. But to get myself out of the picture, I'm going to hold the camera and the lens directly overhead. And what this does, because the lens cannot see straight down, it actually takes me out of the photograph. So the key to this is to hold the camera as level as possible and to pull your elbows in and your stomach in so you can get a clean shot. So I'm going to take a picture right now. Now, these work outside because of the increased light conditions. You'll have a very difficult time doing this indoors, so make sure you don't cut a tripod out of your budget. Now, for this last shot, we're going to take advantage of the lens's unusual configuration. As you may recall when we were talking about setting up the camera and the lens, this particular lens, because of the way the mirror is shaped, It can see down at about 65 degrees, but it can only see up at about 45. And because we're close to our subject property, we're going to take advantage of that fact. What we're going to do is we're going to turn the lens upside down. Now, when you're taking pictures upside down, there are two things to consider. One is, if we actually set the lens directly on the ground, it's actually going to put a great deal of emphasis directly on things like cracks in the sidewalk, rocks, and leaves. The second issue is we want to make sure the camera's level. So what I'm going to do is try to eliminate both problems by using a common household device, and that's just a 2 or 3 gallon bucket. What I'm going to do is set the bucket upside down, and if I need to level it, I might put some shims or some rocks or something to make sure that I get the base of this bucket level. And what I'm going to do then is actually set the lens on top of it. Now what we've done is raised it up enough so we're not going to emphasize the ground. The last thing I have to do with an inverted photograph is I've got to set the timer on the camera, and again, I've got to get out of the picture. So I'm going to start the shutter here, and I've got 10 seconds to get out of the picture. Now that we've finished up taking exterior photographs, let's go inside and talk about some of the different issues that are involved in taking virtual tours indoors.